Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Tim Boback, Head of Attack Surface Management at Group IB. And we'll kick off straight away. We're going to be talking today about mastering attack surface management for cyber defense, talking about this new technology, how it's emerging, how it's impacting the market and also cyber defense, and what this means for your businesses and your partners, and how you can use this new technology to stay ahead of cyber attacks. We'll be talking a little bit today about the different ways that the attack surface impacts cybersecurity, how this plays a day-to-day role in cybersecurity, and what you can do in order to improve your attack surface management so that incidents happen less frequently, making your cyber defense more effective and easy. So we'll dive right in. So I'll make it a full screen and let's go. So just a quick introduction though about Group IB and how we've performed research in this space in order to get a good understanding of attack surface management and how we reached our technology into attack surface management. So as you may know, Group IB is about 600 people spread worldwide with headquarters in Singapore. And today I'm sitting in Dubai and working with our team directly to work on attack surface management, make it relevant for this particular location and region. In terms of what we do, we started off as an incident response company. And so we have a hands-on view of how incidents happen, how to respond to incidents, and what they look like. And this is obviously accompanied by statistics on our own experiences responding to cybercrime and APT incidents. At the same time, we obviously do have a very mature threat intelligence capability, so we have a very good understanding of the threat landscape and the types of attacks that are happening. The first thing, obviously, it's worth mentioning is that we also do have a red team at Group IB, and so we accordingly do our own assessments, and we understand, like many of you do in the blue team, that the threat actors have really got an unfair advantage. That is that all throughout the kill chain, they have much more effective ways of targeting than we do in defending, simply because the attack surfaces that we protect are very large. And because of the nature of the industry that we work in, the fact that everything's become digital, especially since the start of COVID and increased digitalization, which we observe across the region, more and more potential areas of attack and the attack surfaces are obviously expanding. And this means that there's more capacity on the MITRE ATT&CK framework for attacks. There's different TTPs that can be used to overcome organizations' defenses. So how can we work in order to protect more efficiently and more effectively? Well, it's obviously, in any case, worth looking at history in order to define how things used to be and our current paradigm and how things are affecting us and how the actual incidents in on the ground are happening. So fairly obviously, a lot was on-prem and still is on-prem. But as we've increased our attack surfaces, people are working from home, the complexity of where our infrastructure sits, where it's exposed to, how it's configured, has dramatically expanded. And this is a trend that continues to happen. If we're talking about how people have migrated to the cloud, obviously that hasn't happened in every instance and cannot due to data localization, also compliance procedures and laws. We're still seeing that obviously there's a vast expansion. And as people use increasingly software as a service, on-prem, off-prem, private clouds, and other mixed infrastructure or hybrid solutions, we see that the attack surfaces that previously were relatively contained and easy to manage have become significantly more difficult to track. And what do I mean by this? It's worth noting that in many incidents that we respond to, organizations will have a very, very good knowledge and well-protected infrastructure on their main and core domains, the infrastructure that the IT and security teams know about. However, as IT has become more democratized because of software as a service, because of different ways that businesses are now digitalizing, this means that the amount of people with access to these kind of solutions has increased, the amount of potential configurations or even misconfigurations has expanded, and this means that everyone is now providing more avenues for attack. And the problem that we see isn't that people don't necessarily know how to remediate or protect against these issues, is that it's becoming extremely difficult for organizations to know all of their assets. because there may be ephemeral assets that appear on the perimeter for a short period of time. There can be, for example, third-party services. A good example is always marketing, where third-party services and providers might collect customer data that are spun up and interact with your PII and also your business. And this expansion, this data, these integrations can lead to a large amount more risk. Let's make this into a really simple example though, from a lockpick banking incident. And in this particular case, it's actually an old incident. I quite like it though, because it provides a very simple example of what we're talking about. In this particular case, there was an exposed RDP on the perimeter that was then accessed through brute force. And then the standard kill chain took place. Now, many of you will recognize the tools used, Mimikatz, lateral movement, more RDP logins, removal of AV, advanced internal ICP scanners, and then running ransomware, EXTs. This is all standard, but what the point that I'm trying to make is that when we map this onto a framework like MITRE, or if we use the Lockheed Martin kill chain, we'll see that the incident had several stages, and there'll be the stages prior to the attack or during the initial steps, so initial access. Then persistence will be run, could be collecting account credentials and logins using Mimikatz and running keys. And then obviously we can go through evasion, defense evasion, where AV was disabled using admin privileges, and throughout then the different protocols and steps that were taken in order to then launch ransomware across the endpoint. So it was done very quickly, very easy, but very simple. But the core point that I want to make is that obviously we have layered detection. Many of you will be running EDR, you'll have NTAs, you'll have network segmentation, you'll have basic logical defenses, also technology solutions deployed, but it's really easiest to stop the attack before it actually happens. So if monitoring your external perimeter, you're able to identify this, then you're going to be cutting down on the amount of time you're spending on providing an incident. In this particular case, the victim organization actually only had that port open for a very short period of time. It was an admin gaining access to make some changes. He forgot to shut off that particular service. It hadn't been on before, but because the attacker, and as we're jumping back, we can see that the attackers have got an unfair advantage. All they need is for access to be available to them on the perimeter for a very short period of time. Then they can then pivot that into an attack, get a foothold inside of the organization, and find a way of beaconing out and establishing other C2s for connecting into that victim organization. This means that obviously it's best to try and stop the incidents before they happen, because of the way that all of the, I suppose, advantages are pushed towards the attacker. And obviously any of you who've got red team experience will notice this. It's much easier to be able to then perform initial analysis and cut down the attack surface before then having to respond to a full incident. So how do we do this with attack surface management? And what does attack surface management do? Well, in all cases across the industry, obviously we take part in, the industry standards, the Gartners, the Forresters of this world, Cooper and Coles, and also all of these overviews of the landscape of solutions. You can say with pretty solid accuracy that the solutions are all operating in the same way. And that is by going out and identifying external assets. Now, some solutions do this with a manual input. We find this approach to be flawed. And the reason is that the solution should be hybrid, in the sense that automatically your assets need to be discovered, and discovered in the same way that an attacker might target your organization. And that is by identifying assets, performing automated reconnaissance in order to identify weak points. If you just do this based off of a manual collection of data, obviously those lists of known IPs or known domains or known assets and infrastructure may be out of date. One of the core issues that we see, and I don't think I've got the figures here, but I do know them off the top of my head, and that's that about 55% of all incident response that we do globally at Group IB each year is actually because of perimeter-based security issues. Everyone always talks up, MOTET, they talk up, different methods that are used to gain initial access, whether it's phishing with malware, so on and so forth, maybe exploitation of, could be some of the stuff that gets into the news about supply chain attacks that everyone pays a lot of attention to, very glamorous, exciting cyber incidents, but actually 55% of all the IR that we do is because of poorly secured perimeter. And when we dig into those incidents and talk to the victims and do the IR, the security teams are operating normally. It's just that they don't know the assets that they're meant to protect. So it's way more difficult for them to then protect them. These incidents, when someone's gaining access, not on a, their known IP list, it's not on their main domain, for example, or the assets closely linked to it. It's via their, back office. It's via their forgotten infrastructure, overlooked, maybe a test instance, that someone spun up a couple years ago and it's just been renewed in the cloud. These kind of situations, this is what is driving incidents today. And so in order to be able to discover this, you need to take the same approach as an attacker. And as you go through this process and you update the assets inventories, then you can then check for the vulnerabilities, gain the visibility, and repeat this process 24/7. Where the goal of this solution and attack surface management is to manage the attack surface, to give visibility to it. It's not continuous automated red teaming. That's obviously an entirely different set of use cases. It's not the same as a pen test, which is obviously done at one point in time by a human. It is automating the discovery of the assets and then identifying risks against them so you can protect them more effectively. Something that is maybe not the most exciting thing in the world, but actually in terms of the uplift and the reduction of cybersecurity risk, one of the most important things that we can do today. So obviously we like to refer back to how the industry sees this space as a whole. And as I've talked around automating process of IT discovery, rather than doing this manually, hunting for shadow IT, you can obviously do this automatically. Forrester defines this as attack surface management as the process of continuously discovering, identifying, venturing, and assessing the exposures of an estate. External attack surface management, according to Gartner, is, again, risk coming from internet-facing assets and systems they may be unaware of. And this is really what I'm making the core statement about. It's about gaining visibility across the IT estate. Now, when we run proof of concepts or with our existing customers, we see that many, I would be surprised in my experiences in the past 18 months where we have had organizations that haven't seen some assets that were available. Now, they might not be at risk, but very frequently people will come to us and say, oh, we totally forgot that we had that old domain or that old infrastructure, that old IP range, simply because there is so much that is now internet facing and there's so much to cover that it's become a very difficult task to run manually as our organizations become more complex. So how do we address this at Group IB? Well, one of the things that we've been doing since 2015, or it started in 2014 and 2015, is we've been developing our own methodologies for scanning the entire internet. So how do we do this at Group IB? It's important to know what's the methodology that we use. Well, we started to track APT threat actors by scanning infrastructure and fingerprinting command and control servers so that we could identify them and give those IPs, give those signatures to our customers and say, here's a bunch of C2 domains. You can feed that into your SIM, you can block them. Very useful, keeps up to target on the main threat actors that might be targeting an organization or region. We still do this today. We just released a blog post with an MSSP partner of ours in the UK where we've identified significant amounts of Sidewinder C2 infrastructure using this very approach, going out and scanning the entire internet, and then identifying, finding similarities, mapping back malware, giving this view. We very quickly realized that we can do the same thing, not for malware, but for legitimate assets as well. So we then go out and we scan and discover the entire internet on a rolling basis. This is done in order to increase visibility of what's out there, scanning the entire IPv4 range, also resolving on IPv6, additionally feeding in feeds from our cert. Group IB has a cert as part of First and Trusted Introducer, OIC cert, amongst others. But effectively, this is an organization where we work to keep the internet safe. And we receive through that huge amounts of new information about registered domains, registered infrastructure, and we also then discover and resolve. And then what we do is we enrich all of this data that we have about the whole internet, and we focus it in down to a single company. And that's done by using passive SSL, passive DNS, historic data, large amounts of different data sets that you can see and read here on the screen, and enriching that with leaked data, malware C2 information, threat intelligence. And we then provide this discovery method and also map issues to it. So for example, we might be able to identify that a customer, we enter their main domain into our system, we create a profile, and then once we've done that, the system works to identify, and I'll be giving a demo shortly, so works to identify then the related assets to that infrastructure, the other domains, the other IPs. And as we go through that process and conduct enrichment, we then identify other potential problems, not just vulnerabilities by looking at technical headers or unpatched infrastructure, but also dark web data, compromised accounts, and the level of security around those domains, whether it's through general cyber hygiene or through things relating, for example, into SSL, TLS, security, and general DNS hygiene. So just before we go into the demo, I'd like to break down how we conduct this. We provide overall risk scores. You'll be seeing some of the scores in the interface in a second, but we provide an overall risk score based on the impact of the potential cybersecurity risks that we see on the perimeter. We have different categories, each of which then have a different weighting, vulnerabilities being obviously higher, the credentials being higher. As you can see, they're broadly speaking in order in terms of the relevance that we assign to them to give an overall risk score. We identify the total number of risks, total number of security issues, and we use that to create a score, a temporal score for each issue category. This is allowing you to get a quick snapshot, whether for yourself or for your management, of where your highest cluster of issues lie, so that they can then be effectively remediated. And the use cases that come along with this are obviously the discovery, the GRC, the patch management, the visibility that you can gain. But obviously you can use the same approach for rating the cybersecurity risk of your third parties, for conducting M&A due diligence, or performing insurance underwriting. There are many approaches that are relevant in this particular case. So without further ado, we'll jump into a demo and then talk a little bit more around the solution and how it can be used alongside other Group IB technologies in order to be able to work effectively. Following this quick demo, and I'll remember how to share my slides. There we go. So as I've touched on, unifying cyber risk prevention is something very important. We obviously have fraud protection, XDR, business email protection, DFIR services, red teaming at Group IB, but we wanted to just focus in on the digital risks. And obviously these are manifold, but they're broken down quite easily, as I've just described, into these three areas, where you have the external threats beyond your perimeter, beyond your organization, which is the digital risk, and also understanding the attackers, that's the threat intelligence, and then your own infrastructure discovery and monitoring that attack surface so that you can keep up to date and well patched. That's done through the attack surface management. So this is our way of reducing the risks to an organization, being proactive in defense, rather than waiting for it to hit on your endpoints and then halfway through an incident could have been prevented. You're playing catch up to these attackers who've got this unfair advantage that we mentioned at the start of our report. So obviously there's a number of industry reports that are out. One of the most recent ones is Novartica. Many organizations are taking active participation in the space. I think there are around 90 startups in attack surface management. Group IB's is one of the longest standing, since we've been developing the technology since 2015. But our view and our goal, and there's reports out, by various different ratings agencies like GigaOm, Frost and Sullivan, and so on and so forth. Our goal with this is to make sure that any part of your digital attack surfaces are at risk, and these take collective defense. So best practices should indicate that we dive into this, we discuss this as a security concern. And I think as the year will go on, attack surface management will increasingly be covered in industry discussions. And so we're having this conversation today at Group IB, making you aware of how we see the problem, why we think it's important, going back to the initial slides at the beginning of this report and webinar, and talking about those incidents, how it maps back, and how we perform our discovery, how we make our customers secure so that they can mitigate these risks and prevent these incidents early and get a head start in the uneven game that is cyber defense in 2023. So we obviously provide test access to our partners and our customers. It's a very simple solution to use, as I think was immediately clear during today's demo. We give very quick results. It takes just a few pieces of information for us to launch proof of concept. There's no installation required. We don't provide any on-premises based scans. We're not taking any data from inside of our customers' networks. We're doing all of this external. We are in the product category external attack surface management. And this means that you can obviously just take your domains, enter them into our system, and we'll perform the discovery. All of the data that we collect is done externally and in a passive mode, so there's no impact onto the operability of your systems. And we're scanning the entire internet 24/7, 365. There's probably a high probability that we have already scanned you, so apologies in advance. But the approach is very simple. You can contact our sales team directly. I think many of you will have contacts, or via our website, reach out and see the solution, test it, get visibility, and see if you can identify any new assets or any new risks that might be on your perimeter that we can discover. So also it's worth mentioning that we have this capability for monitoring third parties. Many organizations have increasing regulatory requirements to monitor major third parties, and we have a separate module and separate logic for monitoring those third-party partners who can be an additional risk. So we will just jump straight into Q&A. I think I've given enough resumes so far, but I'll be viewing any requests in the chat in order to give further insights. So the first one that I can see here is, and I think I've addressed it in part, is how is attack surface management different from digital risk protection? I'll just rehash this particular question. External attack surface management is your assets that you own in, your IP ranges, your services that you maintain for your customers on your perimeter, your domains, your DMARC, etc., etc. I won't labor the point. Whereas brand protection, or DRP as we call it, digital risk protection, is about the digital risk beyond your perimeter. So for example, what are people making fake LinkedIn profiles about your company? Are people making phishing sites that are impersonating and using your logo and then defrauding people? Are people making fake job offers on LinkedIn about your brand and trying to trick people into paying them money? That is digital risk protection. It's not tied to your assets. We don't detect this using attack surface management. We do detect this using digital risk prevention and have a full managed service available to protect against those kind of risks. What are the best practices for using ASM threat intel and brand protection for a medium enterprise? So that's quite a big question. We actually have an education department that oversees that entire question. We provide trainings to many of our customers as a paid service, where you can come in with us, and on a quarterly basis, we then help organizations skill up in order to be able to understand these best practices in detail. But I think if we were to answer the question from a very simple perspective, it's about knowing what's out there. the more you know about your profiles online, your digital assets, how your organization looks from the outside, and the more that you track that and the more proactive you are in that, and the more that you understand how your industry might be targeted by threat actors, if you understand the risk and you know about it, then you can prevent against it. The majority of cybersecurity incidents are not 0 days. Vendors like to talk about 0 days. They go, 0 days, they scare customers. Most of the stuff that is causing incidents, everybody knows about already. It's about staying ahead and maintaining informational awareness so that you can protect against those threats more effectively. And that then ties into the next question, which is how can those technologies amplify security in any organization? That question's very straightforward. It's about knowledge and visibility. Obviously, you can automate a great deal around this. You can set up workflows, as I was showing in today's call, where you can select and action any of these assets. But the core goal is to maintain these steps and visibility into a working framework that you can use. And whether that's through a managed service like our digital risk prevention, where we take that entirely onto our hands, or whether that's through a step-by-step process like in threat intelligence or DRP with notifications and integrations, that's also entirely possible. So I'll just set the chat for any additional questions if there are any, and I will refer to our team. Currently, I think we've covered everything. So I'll pause for another minute. And thank you all for your attention and coming today. And if no more questions then filter through in the next few minutes, we can call it a day and give everyone back 15 minutes of their time. So nothing as in mind now. So I'll bid you good day, and you guys know how to find us, either through our sales team or you can reach me as well at boback@groupib.com, and we'll be very happy to address any further questions. So thank you very much for your attention, and look forward to protecting and fighting against cybercrime. Take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.